That bonding happens because that joint attention has been established. You and your child are here together in the present moment. You're thinking about the same thing, you're looking at the same thing, you're doing the same thing. And now, since all of that has been established, the door is open for social connection. It's really a beautiful thing. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mindshaper SLP. As always, I am Rebecca Robbins, and I create content to help autistic individuals and their families create fruitful and fulfilling lives. Today, we are going to do that by talking about one of my very, very favorite therapy tools, co-regulation. So last week, I posted a video about co-regulation and just going over the basics of what co-regulation is. I do recommend that if you haven't watched that video yet, pause this video, go watch that one first, because you need that foundational knowledge of what co-regulation is before we dive into how to facilitate co-regulation with your child. So go ahead, I'll wait here for you. Pause this video, go watch that one, come back, and then we'll be ready to go. So today we're going to talk about what joint attention is and very simple starter activities you can use with your child, no matter their ability level, whether they're non-speaking or conversational. Just simple starter activities you can use around the home to get started with facilitating this amazing benefit that will come from participating in these co-regulation activities, and that is the development and strengthening of joint attention. So what is joint attention anyways? Joint attention is when you and your child are both focusing on the same thing at the same time. You're thinking about the same thing at the same time. You're looking at the same thing at the same time, or you're talking about the same thing at the same time. This is a foundational skill that's needed for conversations. In order to have a conversation and maintain the topic of conversation, you and your conversational partner need to have joint attention, which means you're both thinking about the same topic and talking about the same topic at the same time. I bet if you think about your interactions with your autistic child, that might be an area that's challenging for them, or they might be able to keep that joint attention if it's a topic that they're super interested in, if it's one of their special interests. But it's harder for them to maintain that joint attention or that topic if it's something that they are less interested in. Or maybe your child is non-speaking or highly distracted, and it's hard for them to focus on not just a conversational topic, but focus on an activity together, or to have a shared point of focus. And that is why you want to start working on co-regulation and co-regulation tasks, because as I discussed in last week's video, it really helps bring your child's attention to the present moment and to the thing that you are focusing on, so that you are both thinking about the same thing at the same time. It's when two people are thinking about the same thing at the same time that it opens up the door for bonding and connection. That is a really important factor for social connectedness, is to be thinking about the same thing at the same time. Let's just give a little bit of background in terms of where joint attention comes in when we're talking about typical language development. When kids first start communicating, they're primarily using language to request or protest. Request is when you ask for what you want or need, and to protest is to say, no, I don't want that, or to remove unwanted things. This is also the place that many therapists will start when they're working with a non-speaking autistic child, or very young autistic child, or an autistic child that doesn't have very much functional communication, or an AAC user. We focus on request or protest because that type of language use really helps motivate the early language learner to be motivated to use language in an intentional way, because it starts to teach them, like, oh, when I talk, I get the things I want. Or when I talk, I can manipulate the environment. And I don't mean manipulate in a negative way, but just change or control the environment around me in ways that work for me or in the ways that I want, or to remove things that I don't want. Especially with an AAC user, this is very powerful when we work with request, to teach the child that their communication device is their voice and motivates them to want to have that communication device in front of them. Even if they're using an app on an iPad as their communication device, when a child is bought into that communication device, you really don't have to worry about putting guided access on so that they can't exit out of the communication app, or they don't want to stay on the communication app because they'd rather be on YouTube or their favorite app, because they have bought in and they know that that app gets them what they want. And that is the power of starting with request and protest. However, that's not how we communicate with each other. We don't just go around making requests and making protests to everybody in our environment. No, at a certain point, we expand our language use as a form of social connecting and to share our thoughts and feelings with each other, to comment on what's happening in the environment around us, to share our thoughts, our feelings, our ideas, to share stories of the things that have happened to us, to share memories of the things that we did together, or to talk about things that are coming up in the future that we're excited about. When we're working with an early language learner or an autistic child who's just learning to use language in more functional ways, it's when we try to move from that requesting and protesting phase into using language for more social purposes, where it's more just commenting or using language as a means to just connect with another person. That is often the place where some autistic communicators will get stuck. And it can be really hard to move from that requesting phase to using language as a way to socially engage and connect with others, just for the mere enjoyment of the social connection. And that is what working on these co-regulation activities, that ironically enough kind of takes the language aspect out of the interaction. It really helps teach that child on a cellular level, on a neurological level, the joy of being jointly attending with another person. Is that right? How would I say this? Establishing joint attention with another person. These co-regulation activities really do that really, really well. And I know I mentioned last week in my video that I have found working on the co-regulation activities with my students that really have limited functional language, that they're mostly using it for their own entertainment purposes, or they're doing a lot of scripting or the Gestalt language processors. When I dial it back and I'm working on that co-regulation and just being connected in a nonverbal way with those children, they are so much more present with me. They are so much more motivated to connect with me. And it is then that all of a sudden they will pop out with a statement that blows my mind and I never knew that they were able to say. Here's a story. I was working with this student years ago. He was, I think, in first grade. I did a lot of co-regulation activities with him because he was one of those young boys that had a lot of mental chatter, and it really prevented him from being able to be present and connected with others in the moment. I was working on showing pictures, and he would make a statement as to what the people in the picture had in their thought bubble. I showed him a picture, which was an acting shot of me with my co-actor on stage. And he's looking at the picture, and I can see him really like searching in his brain for what he wanted to say. And all of a sudden he came out with, I really enjoy spending time with you. And I was blown away for that type of a statement for that child. I had never heard him say something like that before, but it was working on these relationship development techniques and spending lots of time with co-regulation that all of a sudden he was able to access that thought and feeling language. Now, it took time. This was after I had been working with this student for a couple of years. I was fortunate enough to have him on my caseload for a couple of years, but I share this story with you because it really is the value of when you work on these co-regulation activities, that this is the type of communication you can get from your autistic child. And I bet if you think about the interactions you have with your autistic child, they probably don't express their true thoughts or feelings to you too frequently. And I bet that would feel really bonding and feel really good inside if they were able to express those sorts of things to you. Before I move into giving you specific activities and strategies to try at home with your child, I want to just refer to what Linda Murphy says about co-regulation in her book. And again, if you've watched my video from last week, this book really does a great job of breaking down what co-regulation is. It can be a concept that's hard to wrap your brain around unless you actually have seen it in action. And I do hope to be able to share some video examples with you in future videos so that you can see co-regulation in action. But I highly recommend this book along with her declarative language handbook. So Linda Murphy about joint attention says, when we communicate about something separate from ourselves that may be of mutual interest to another person, such as our communication partner, this is called joint attention. We, ourselves, and our communication partner are jointly attending to something other than ourselves at the same time and communicating to share observations and ideas around this separate thing. So that is why it's so important to really foster this skill of being able to establish joint attention and be able to maintain joint attention, because it is a pre-conversational necessary skill, so that we can bond and connect about things outside of ourselves with our child, and they can do the same with us. We see this in typically developing children even before they can really speak. They might point up, they hear a noise and they point up to an airplane in the sky, and then they look at their parent and back at the airplane. The child's pointing at what they're interested in, and then looking at the parent to check in to see if they see it too, and then back at the airplane. So now the child has established, okay, you're looking at the same thing I'm looking at, and they're both thinking about the airplane. And then the parent says, oh yeah, it's an airplane, look at it up in the sky. And the parent provides context as to what the child sees, and they're both thinking and talking about the same thing. Now, autistic children will often need very specific guidance and scaffolded support to be able to establish this joint attention, or to initiate something like that, where they're going to point at something that's a distal point of reference and then check in with another person to see if they're looking at it too. And co-regulation is a great way to help facilitate and foster this skill. So today I'm going to give you some examples of some very simple activities you can do around the house. And I picked activities around the house because they're easy to just build into your day. It also starts to strengthen a daily activity skill that your child may or may not be learning, or will eventually need to learn to become an independent adult. And it's something that you already are probably doing throughout your day, so you don't have to go gather special materials or carve out special time to do this co-regulation activity. I want to make it as easy as possible for you to be able to start working on these things. And the best way to do that is by incorporating the activities that you're already doing. But it's important to remember, when you are engaging in these daily activities with the intention of working on co-regulation with your child, you have to do it at a time where the process of doing the activity with your child is more important than getting the activity done, or getting the activity done perfectly. So if you're in a pinch for time, if you're in a rush, that's probably not the time to say, oh, let's turn this into a co-regulation activity, because then you're going to be more focused on completing the activity and the completion of the activity than you are the process. So that is an important reframe that you need to think about when you are using these daily activities, that we are more focused on the process and the co-regulation and the bonding that can occur by structuring the activities in this way than you are with what the activity looks like to be completed. My number one go-to starter activity to work on co-regulation is what I call the RDI walk, or the co-regulation walk. And I did describe this a little bit in my previous video, but I'm going to go into it a little more detail. Literally, you just are walking with your child. And I always start with holding hands with my child. And eventually, as you practice this walk more and more, the goal is that you don't have to hold your child's hand and they will remain with you anyway, because you have fostered that co-regulation. And if they're co-regulated with you, then they're staying with you and they're matching your actions. So you just start by walking, and then every once in a while, stop, look at your child, wait for them to reference you. It doesn't mean that they have to have perfect eye contact with you, but it just means they have to check in at some level to see, like, hey, why did we stop? And once they do that, you're going to smile and nod. And you can, if you want, say walk and continue the walk. Just start there. Just start there until you get to a place where the pattern has been established and your child, as soon as you stop, is checking in with you and smiles. And you'll find that what happens is your child will probably smile and nod for you too. Once that pattern has been established, then you can start to build and variations onto the activity, which is important to develop something called dynamic thinking or flexible thinking, which is an RDI, relationship development intervention technique or goal. You start to vary the pattern, vary the activity. So when you stop and your child looks and nods, maybe you go, and you shake your head. And maybe the child goes, walk, walk. And you go, walk. And then you go, nod your head, yeah, walk. And then you can keep walking. And so that's starting to teach your child that they're not walking until you nod your head and say, yeah, let's keep going. Or maybe you stop after the pattern has been established and your child goes, walk. And you go, run. And then you take off together and run. And sometimes I'll go, run, 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 stop. Just to add that little bit of language in there. If your child's young, if that's the appropriate language input. If you're working with an older child, maybe it's a little less childlike. And when you're saying run, 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 stop, maybe you just go run, stop. And you just do it in a manner that is more appropriate for their age. And when you stop, they will look at you right away, because remember, the pattern has been established, and they'll be like, walk. And maybe you shake your head yes, and you walk. Or maybe you shake your head no, and you say hop. And so you try to co-regulate as you bend your knees together and hop. Or maybe you just go hop, 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 and you just start doing fast hops, and then stop, wait for the child to check in, and you can go continue on like that. You could do run, walk, hop. You could maybe just make it those 3 variations at first. And your child will probably start to say which one they want to do. And you can either give your child a head nod and then move forward and do that. Or you can choose to shake your head no and see if they're able to change their request. But the point is, it'll be very bonding, and your child has learned that when mom stops or when dad stops, I need to check in and see why, and check in and see what's happening. And then you're getting that approval. Yes, we're going to keep going. And that doesn't happen until you're both together decided that you're moving forward and what you're going to move forward doing, so that you're staying together and you have that joint attention. And you'll find that the chatter that happens in your child, where they're talking to themselves and they're more engaged with themselves, you're going to notice that that starts to get less and less and more diminished, because they're co-regulated with you. They're thinking about the same thing you're thinking about. Another thing I like doing in those walks is taking bigger steps and then doing it slow and seeing if the child can really imitate how you're moving your legs, and then slowly increase the speed and see if your child can continue to match that speed. You have to be really co-regulated to be able to match that slow speed and then slowly speed up the action together. So that's an RDI walk. There are videos on YouTube that you can see this in action. I would love to create a video where it's just me breaking down videos of RDI walks so you can see it in action. So I'm working on that. Stay tuned. Let me know in the comments if that's something that you would like to see. All right, moving on to some more household activities that you can work on co-regulation. Remember, we talked about in a co-regulation activity, there's 3 components or 3 roles that need to be established. The child needs a competent role, which means that they are able to be independent in their role. It needs to be a genuine role, and it needs to be contingent, which means what they do is dependent on what you do as the parent. It's not something that's scripted and rote that they can just memorize and perform like a robot. No, they have to stay in tune with what you're doing to know how to do their part. So doing laundry, you could be the taker outer, where you take the clothes out of the washing machine, and their job is to be the putter inner. And I encourage you to actually use these terms, and you have to start the activity by letting your child know, my job is to take out the clothes. Your job is to put the clothes in the dryer. And so you take the clothes out of the washing machine and hand them to your child puts it in the dryer. Then you just continue that pattern. When it seems like that pattern has been very firmly established, I would encourage you to vary it a little bit. And this is really where the bonding comes in. So now take the clothes out of the dryer, and instead of having it in the same place you've been putting it, now hold it out here. And so now you're going to find your child looks to where it usually is. It's not there. They might look at you, and then they look and like, oh, I got to get it here. And then that's co-regulation. That's joint attention. And if that was hard for your child to do, then that's a clue that this is the level that you need to stay at until that becomes easy for your child. And then you could start moving it all around, or maybe you put it on your head and your child pulls it off your head and you laugh. Once the pattern's established, the more silly variation you can add to the pattern, the more that the process is going to become more fun and bonding for you and your child. And that bonding happens because that joint attention has been established. You and your child are here together in the present moment. You're thinking about the same thing. You're looking at the same thing. You're doing the same thing. And now, since all of that has been established, the door is open for social connection. It's really a beautiful thing. So that's one way you could do it with laundry. Same thing, unloading the dishwasher. Your child's job could be taking the dishes out of the dishwasher, handing them to you, and you put it in the cabinet. Once that pattern has been established, a good way to vary it is you can add in the or the Let's pretend your child takes out a glass and you have the plate cabinet open. You might want to go, And so the child then has to problem solve, oh, mom doesn't want the glass, I'm going to put that back. And now they have to look to see, try something else. So they might take a lid out and offer it to you, and you go, And then as long as your child still seems engaged and open to continuing to problem solve on their own, you could just let that land and see if they will on their own find the plate, and then you nod your head yes. If it seems like they're starting to get frustrated, or you might be losing your child at that point, I would encourage you to point to what you want. And by following the points, you're still working on co-regulation. You're still working on joint attention. You can even touch the plate if that's the level of support that your child needs. And then they hand you the plate and you smile and nod and put the plate away. And then you can follow that process. Now, if unloading the whole dishwasher is too much for where your child is right now, that's okay. Maybe the goal right now is just to unload the top rack of the dishwasher together, or the bottom rack, and then you work towards the whole unload. And each time, hopefully your child starts to establish the pattern and the routine, and you can build and add more and more pieces onto the activity until they get to a place where they're able to unload the whole dishwasher together. And remember, the point of this is not to teach them how to unload the dishwasher. I mean, yes, that's an added benefit that they're starting to learn a life skill, but the point is to have an activity that you're working on together that you can really practice strengthening that joint attention co-regulation muscle because that's where the bonding and the social connection can happen once that is established. So remember, that's the goal. Once that pattern has been firmly established, just like with the other activities, that's when you can start to add in some silliness. And when the silliness gets added in, that's when the connection and the laughing happens. And you'll find that you and your child are looking at each other's eyes, you're laughing together, and you know that you're laughing about the same thing. Think about those moments that you're able to achieve that with your child and how great that feels. That is what you will be able to work towards when you are working on these co-regulation activities. I have a few more for you. Setting the table. Now, with setting the table, again, if your child needs it to just start at a very simple level, maybe their job is just to put the napkins on, and you're the napkin giver and they're the napkin putter oner or the napkin taker. And then you can build up to all the different components of how to set a table. And maybe your child needs a visual target to aim for. So maybe you have like a circle, that's where the glasses go, or a placemat that shows the outline of a plate, the outline of the fork, the outline of the knife, so that your child has that visual target to aim for. And they'll know exactly where the cup goes, exactly where the plate goes, exactly where the knife goes, and exactly where the, I meant to say fork, because fork's on the left, knife's on the right. Exactly where the fork goes, exactly where the knife goes. And they won't get overwhelmed or frustrated with not knowing those things because they have the visual target. But if your child is at a place where they don't need that level of support, then that's fine too. Because remember, we want our child to feel competent. It needs to be their role. They need to feel like they're able to do it. Otherwise, they're going to check out and they don't want to have joint attention with you. They don't want to be co-regulated with you because their nervous system might be triggered because they're not feeling competent in what you're asking them to do. So we want to set up the situation or scaffold it in a way that your child feels like, oh yeah, I'm confident, I'm competent, I can do this. And maybe you have to start with you're handing the cup or the plate to your child and you're standing right next to them when you're doing it. And then they're right next to where they put the cup down. So there's very little traveling that needs to happen. And over time, maybe you work up to taking the plates out and having them on a stack on the counter, and your child moves all the way from the counter to the table, all the way from the counter back to the table, all the way from the counter back to the table. And maybe when they turn around, you're standing in a different spot with the plate. And that's where the bonding and the silliness comes in. Another great activity is carrying in the groceries. Anytime you and your child can share the load, no pun intended, share the load of carrying something together, that's the easiest, most basic co-regulation activity. If we're talking about carrying the grocery bags in, you each take one handle and you carry the groceries in together. And again, remember, it's about the process. It's not about the finished product. So maybe you want to unload all of your frozen stuff first so that all that's left are the things that can take longer to get into the house and into where they belong. And you just have you hold one handle and your child holds the other. Then once they get there, maybe their job is to take the items out of the bag and hand them to you and you put it away. And over time, you can start to switch roles where you take the item out and they have to put it away. So you're slowly starting to teach them how to do the more complicated aspect or job of the activity that you're working on. But always start simple and establish the pattern first before you add any variations. I'm going to say it again and again because that's very, very, very important in all of this. And it will be important in you taking the suggestions I give you and coming up with your own activity. Sweeping together. Maybe using the broom actually is too hard of a task for your child right now, but they can hold the dustpan. And if you think about someone holding a dustpan and someone else sweeping the dirt into the dustpan, you have to be co-regulated and you have to have joint attention to be able to do it. Because if the person holding the dustpan isn't paying attention and they're holding the dustpan in the wrong spot, you're not going to get the dirt into the dustpan. So that's a great starter co-regulation activity. And then maybe you work together where you keep the broom in the dustpan and you carry the dirt together to the garbage can to throw it away. But maybe that part is something you work up to after the pattern of I'm the sweeper, you're the dustpan holder has been established and is competent and is able to be done smoothly while maintaining that co-regulation and that joint attention. And then you can add that new element of, oh, let's carry it to the garbage, and you move together to carry it to the garbage. My last suggestion for a household activity that would be really great for co-regulation, and this one might be a little more challenging if your child's just starting out with working on co-regulation activities, or if your child has a high distractibility level, but folding a blanket together. So if you have ever folded a blanket with another person, you know that you have to be coordinated together, aka co-regulated, to fold the blanket in the correct way so that the blanket isn't twisted and it's actually getting folded in the right way. You don't actually have to show your child ahead of time how to fold the blanket, because if they're co-regulated with you, and maybe you start with something that is like a towel, because a blanket might be a little large, especially if you're working with a younger child, for your child to hold. But if you're just holding, they hold their side of the towel and you hold your side of the towel, just to do that, you have to have co-regulation. And then maybe the first step is just getting your child to fold the towel just like you. And they're matching your actions to fold the towel. And that might be the first pattern you're establishing. Once that's been established, you're going to grab the bottom, wait for your child to grab their bottom, and then do this. And you have to be co-regulated. And then walking together. There might be more steps depending on how big the blanket is or the towel is that you're folding, but that is a great co-regulation activity. Once that pattern of folding has been established, the way that you could switch it up and really create that social connection and bonding is maybe you like do a fake out. You're like, oh, no. Oh, or maybe you go really slow, then fast. And if your child can match that, and there's going to be some laughing that happens, and that's good, because that's where the bonding and the social connection comes in. So that's how you can vary it and add in that silliness, because you might be thinking like, okay, my child's not really going to be that enthused about folding a towel. Why is this so connecting and bonding? Those are the ways that it's connecting and bonding, and establishing the pattern and the co-regulation is the foundation that you have to set up for that social bonding to be able to occur. This is what I want you to glean from these suggestions is the structure. First, you're creating a simple pattern where you're establishing the competent role, the authentic role, and the contingent role. Start with a simple pattern. Do not change the pattern until your child has it. Once your child has the pattern, then you can vary it in just one way. So in the walk, we changed it from me nodding yes to shaking my head no. That was all I did differently. And once that was tolerated, then I added a different action of run. With the laundry, the one thing I changed was I held the laundry in a different spot. So now my child had to look around, establish joint attention again to grab the new laundry. And then I stayed there until that was established. And then you can add the silliness component. With unloading the dishwasher, you're just going to be, the child takes it out and you take it and put it away. Once that pattern's established, then you can add the variation of saying yes or no to certain items. Setting the table, the pattern is just I'm the giver, you're the taker, and you put it on the table. Once that's established, you can start to vary it by adding, they set the whole table, maybe you vary the objects you're giving the child, or maybe you're increasing the distance the child has to travel in order to set the table. So you're going to establish the pattern, wait for the pattern to be established, and then add one new variation at a time, always working at your child's competency level. And when you add the variation, it's just beyond the competent level, but enough that they can easily problem solve what to do so that they still feel successful and you are still maintaining that co-regulation. Let me know in the comments what you think. What activity are you excited to try of the ones I suggested? Let me know how it goes. Let me know if you have any questions. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and they've just introduced a new feature on YouTube for smaller accounts. It really helps my content get seen by more people like you that can really benefit from it, and it's called Hype. So the more you hype my videos, the more YouTube will push it out to other viewers like you, and the more my content will get seen, and the more will make the world a better place for our autistic loved ones. Thank you so much for being here. And as always, I'm Rebecca Robbins, and I'll see you next time.